Welcome back, everybody. Max here again. Today we're talking about chapter 3.1. Now this chapter and the next one, 3.2, will be what I call intermission chapters. They do not follow any specific timeline in the book, but they are necessary in order to create a solid foundation for you to understand where we stand as a collective and what the Khazarian Mafia has done to us in order to put us in this state of disillusion, slavery, and compliance, shall we say. So this is necessary for us to move forward, because later on we will start discussing current events such as the world wars, World War I, World War II, and it's necessary for you to understand certain aspects of our reality before we can step into that realm. Okay? So, the usual housekeeping items that I have to plug shamelessly. My Amazon page, this is where you find the book. My YouTube channel, please share, subscribe. Rumble is still there, doing well. And my Brighteon channel, of course. So, if you, dear listener, has stuck with me so far, you might feel a slight sensation of irritation, maybe even rage. That is understandable. I have been through that too. But it does dissipate in time, I promise you. Once you are aware of certain things, your life starts to make much more sense. You look at your surroundings differently. It's an awakening of sorts, and it's absolutely wonderful. However, having said that, there's another thing that I need to bring to your attention, and this might well drive you over the cliff. So take a deep breath, as we're about to dive underwater, literally, and take a journey that is as painful as is true. And I do apologize in advance. I've had the displeasure and sometimes the misfortune of interacting with lawyers and attorneys. Some of my friends are lawyers. One is even a judge. I was shocked when I realized the amount of study that goes into becoming a lawyer. It is a heavy study, as making it to be a commercial pilot, or worse. I noticed early on, as I moved from country to country, that they all had to pass the bar exam. Now, bar stands for British Accreditation Registry. Me, being the usual pain in the ass, started asking questions after I understood this. Why is a British accreditation necessary to practice law in Japan, China, Sweden, UK, or the US of A? Are these not individual sovereign nations? Do they not have their own constitution and its own laws? Well, the simple answer is no, they do not. As shocking as this sounds, the law is the same worldwide, and this has something to do with the British colonization, sure, but not all of it. Remember how I mentioned before how all countries have a central bank, right? The law works in a very similar ways, and they are tied to the hip. They work and feed off each other, another cancer in metastasis, so to speak. We will start this chapter with a hero of mine, Jordan Maxwell, who can explain it much better than I probably can. And after this very elaborated and complicated chapter, you will finally be free, but you will also be seriously, seriously pissed. So here we go.
Understanding words is what you really need to start doing. You need to start doing your homework and understanding words. If you put an S in front of words, it becomes swords. And that's what words are. they are cutting, they can cause you great trouble. Humans are word control creatures, so we need to establish what words mean. Again, when we talk about law, there's a Roman maximum in law that says, "For he that would be deceived, let him." Simply meaning, if you are so ignorant as to be deceived, then that's your business, that's your problem. So you need to do your homework and find out what the words mean, especially in relation to law and government. Because there is a world of occultism that is operating today throughout the world, in which you use certain words, and when those words are used in a court, they don't mean the same thing at all. Understanding law and the words of law, there are two things that this planet has: water and earth, water and land. Consequently, there are two kinds of law: the law of the land and the law of water. You've heard the term law of the land, but in point of fact, that's precisely what this word means, law of the land, because it is the people who live on land. And that is opposed to something else called the law of the high seas, or the law of water. You need to understand the difference. The law of the land is the law of the culture that lives on the land. And so consequently, the law of the land is different in every country. You can do things in America you can't do in Russia. You can do things in Africa you can't do in England. So the law of the land is the law of the culture that lives on that particular land. However, there is a higher law that dominates the entire world. It's called the law of the water, or the law of the high seas. The law of water is referred to as the law of money. It doesn't matter what color you are, where you're from, or where you live. Money is money. And anytime you're doing banking or using money, you are now under the law of water, maritime admiralty. If you go back in history, in ancient history, where all of this began, back in the land of Canaan, and you probably have heard in the Bible, the land of Canaan. The Canaanites were Phoenician bloodline, and in the ancient Phoenician language, Cana meant merchant banker. The very word merchant comes from mer, M-E-R, for the sea, for water. As a mermaid, we have merchant. Merchant bankers. Let me give an example of the difference between the law of water and the law of the land. The law of water, as I said, is a law of banking, money, as opposed to the law of the custom of the people, or the law of the land. The Statue of Liberty must be put in water. It could not be put on American land as such. It had to be put in the harbor, because it's not the Statue of Freedom. It's a statue of liberty. Liberty is what a sailor gets when he pulls into port on a ship. He gets liberty. He's not free. So America is not the land of the free and the home of the brave. We're not free or brave, period. We're not free. This is not a free country. Now let me give you an example of how this law of the water works. Why is it that you have to go to court? People are always concerned about going to court. You go to court because you play basketball and tennis on a court. How do you play tennis on a court? You play with a racket. Why? Because that's what it is. It's a racket. And make no mistake, they do not pick words by chance. These words are very serious. They do not use words in terms with no avail. These words are very important. When you go into a court, what's the idea of going to court? It's a game, like basketball. The whole idea in a court is to put the ball back in the other guy's court. One team gets up and they throw the ball over to that team. of lawyers. That team gets up and throws the ball back into their court. And consequently, it's a ball game. And the judge is wearing a black robe, so he is the referee. The judge is the referee. He doesn't care which side wins or loses because he's going to get paid anyway. So he couldn't care less. He's merely there as a referee, and that's why he wears a black robe. And that's another interesting subject we can get into later. But the judge is a referee between two teams. The judge, we are told, rules from the bench. The word bench in Latin is a bank. Therefore, the judge rules for the bank. Where do you find banks? You find banks on both sides of a river. They're called river banks. And what does a river bank do? It directs the flow of the current sea. The juice. Consequently, your money is currency because it's the flow, the cash flow. And I'll give you an example of how this works. When a ship pulls into a harbor, all ships are referred to as female. Airships, rocket ships, sailing ships are always female. Why? There's a very good reason. Maritime Admiralty banking law says all ships are female because they're carrying items for money, and so consequently they are under Maritime Admiralty law. Admiralty is where we get the word admiral of the Navy. Let me give you an example of how this works. When a ship pulls into harbor, it parks at the dock, and it ties off at the dock. The captain has to provide for the port authorities a certificate of manifest, because yesterday the ship was not here, but this morning the ship pulled in, so it has manifested. So consequently, all the products, the $800 million worth of TVs or Toyotas, have manifested. So each one of those items coming off of that ship has come off of water. And each end they has come in a ship. And consequently, on a ship, all ships have a captain. The word captain comes from a Latin word capital, money. So the captain represents the money that's on board the ship. And as I said, the captain has to present to the port authorities a certificate of manifest for each and every item. How much does it weigh? What color is it? How many doors does it have? Etc. And consequently, the captain presents a certificate of manifest. The ship is sitting in its berth. Wherever a ship sits when it docks is called its berth. She sits in her berth, berthing a ship. Consequently, all the items, as I said, coming off that ship represent money. They came in on water. They are Maritime Admiralty product. And this is true all over the world. Now, when you were born, your mother's water broke. And when your mother's water broke, you came out. And this is why you have to have a birth certificate, because you are a Maritime Admiralty product under international law. You are considered, your body is considered a Maritime Admiralty product. Your mother delivered you. This is why if you go to Sears and buy a refrigerator, they will ship it to you. They will deliver it. And that's why you were in your delivery room. Your mother was delivering a product. Maritime Admiralty, you came down your mother's birth canal. And once you, and as you're taking one of the televisions or the cars off the ship and it falls down and breaks, that's all right. Sometimes they're stillborn, so consequently you've lost money on that one. Therefore you have to have a death certificate, and it's always signed by the doc. The doc has to sign your birth certificate and your death certificate. All of these words and terms are Maritime Admiralty banking words. And therefore, if you understand lawyers and judges and courts and government are all under international maritime admiralty law. All religions, all churches in the world operate under maritime law. This is why all churches are divided into denominations, like 20s and 50s and 100s. Serious. This is why they're called denominations, because all churches are nothing more than the product of maritime admiralty banking. It's an extraordinary story of occult treason, high treason, and crimes against the state. Make no mistake about it, there has never been a country on the face of the earth, as far back into history as you can go, there has never existed a country in which the people rose up and demanded their right to be free. Never. The concept of human, spiritual, intellectual, and physical freedom is a totally concept that has never, ever existed on the earth. The only time that has ever come into existence was the founding of this country, where it was understood that we were sovereigns and we owned our bodies, and consequently, since 1868, we're now on the International Maritime Admiralty Law. Think about this. When cowboys in Indian movies, when the cowboys would ride into town, they'd get off the horse, they were wearing guns. How come they could walk into a bar carrying guns? And if two guys got in an argument, they could go out on the street and draw on each other in front of the sheriff's office, and the sheriff would do nothing. How come? How come that men could go out in the street and shoot each other in front of everyone and had nothing be done about it? The reason why is because before 1868, all Americans were considered sovereigns. And that's one of the nice things about being a sovereign, is you have the right to be yourself. And consequently, you need to understand that, in one last point I'm going to make before I introduce your speaker, that in 1868 there was a corporation founded. Anyone can incorporate a company. Well, in 1868 there was a company incorporated. And in that particular company, the founders of that company they referred to it as the United States Corporation. And they stipulated that anybody who would be a member of that corporation or work for that corporation would be called not an employee, but a citizen. So today, if you are asked, are you a citizen of the United States, what you think you're being asked is, are you lawfully in this country to do business? That's not lawfully what's being asked. They didn't ask if you're in America lawfully. They ask you a specific question. Are you, of your own volition, out of your own mouth, testifying that you are a citizen of the United States? Because in that way, citizen of the United States means you are an employee of a foreign corporation operating on international maritime law. So today, the President of the United States is the president of a privately owned company. The company is called United States. And the word president is always a word that is used in corporate law. Banks have presidents. All companies have presidents. So there's a corporation called United States, privately owned, and it has a president. President Bush is not the president of America. President Bush is the president of a privately owned company. Privately owned, out of England. And you need to understand words and terms. Because I believe that there is a divine presence in the universe that men call God, and one day that divine presence is going to move on the earth, and we're going to see freedom come back to this world. And when it does, you're going to need to understand words and terms and how they have been used to trick you.
So, how about that? I know it's a long clip, but it kind of sets the tone for what we are about to talk about. Jordan Maxwell was an absolute hero. He is unfortunately not with us anymore because he passed away a couple of years ago. But he did all the groundwork since 50 years. He is one of the absolute heroes in this realm. And I want to maintain his legacy. That's why I'm using him in my book, because his words are not to be forgotten. Okay? Whether you believe it or not, the man really did his homework. So at this point, one would naturally wonder, could all of this be true? Am I not in charge of my own body? Am I just another cog in the mechanism that we call the economy? I would argue that we are, all of us, cogs. And it is prevalent in almost all countries in the realm that we live in. Now, there are 3 city-states in the world, which I described before, with its own governance, its own laws, and its own police force. All 3 interconnected and created and managed by the Khazarian Mafia that we already spoke of. We have Vatican City in Rome, the religious center of our realm and the keeper of knowledge, be it religious, historical, or else. The Vatican vaults exists for a reason, and the city, with its independence, is created to safeguard this information. Its police force is the Swiss Guard. Those funny-looking guys that look like clowns. Do not be fooled, however. These are the elite military forces of Switzerland, the best of the best. These people are trained killers, okay? Secondly, we have the City of London, the economic banking center of our realm. They have their own flag, and where have we seen that cross before in previous chapters? Their own laws and their own police force, as you can see on the picture on the screen. City of London Police. This is a state within a state. One obscure fact that nobody really knows about is the fact that the Queen, now currently the King, is not allowed into the territory without asking for permission. This territory is owned by the Rothschilds. That is, of course, absolutely outrageous, but also absolutely true. The third branch is Washington, D.C., the military and enforcement arm. That is before they went absolutely woke, that is. We spoke about this previously. Washington District of Columbia is not a state, it's a foreign territory. It also has its own laws and its own police force. The reason that the January 6 terrorists who went sightseeing in the Capitol during the famous unarmed insurrection on January 6, 2021 are still in jail is exactly for this reason. Federal law does not apply in DC. They can keep them locked up without trial as long as they wish. Now, this all started in America again, I am truly sorry, in 1871, but leads back to London and ultimately the Vatican. This was all masterfully planned and executed just like the Khazarian Mafia would do. During the Civil War, the Constitutional Republic abandoned Congress, which forced President Lincoln to issue martial law. At this time, the Republic was taken over by foreign insurgents, bankers that is, who replaced it with the United States of America, Inc., in all caps, with a corporation that had the same name. What better way to replace it without anyone noticing? They just got turned into a business and commercialized. This corporation was later purchased by the banking powers behind the Federal Reserve in 1912, as the following clip will describe.
The Organic Act of 1871. On February 21st, 1871, the 41st Congress passed legislation entitled An Act to Provide a Government for the District of Columbia. This is known as Act of 1871. By this action, and with no constitutional authority, a separate form of government and constitution was created for the 10 square miles of land known as the District of Columbia, or Washington, D.C. Incorporated. The original U.S. Constitution was entitled the Constitution for the United States of America. The Act of 1871 changed that title to read the Constitution of the United States of America. By changing the title and the capitalization of the Constitution, the people were removed from this new Constitution. This new Constitution serves only for the corporation of the United States and not for the people of America. The people now have no rights or freedoms, no ownership of property, no right to travel, no right to marry, no right to do business. They are only debt slaves who must serve the corporation. Slaves have no rights, only privileges and permission to live on their master's property. Should they try in any way to use the corporate constitution, they will be charged with criminal trespass because they are not a party to this private contract entitled the Constitution of the United States of America. Our Constitution explicitly states that no citizen shall pay any direct tax to the federal government. Why are the citizens in all our sovereign states forced to pay federal income tax, which is collected by a foreign corporation of England called the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS? Our Constitution explicitly states that our currency is to be backed fully by gold and silver, and that our banking system is to be under control of the Treasury of the United States of America and the Congress. Why is it that I cannot receive gold or silver coin for my currency at my bank? Why does our paper money say Federal Reserve note and not gold or silver certificate as it once did? Why are our banks called Federal Reserve banks and not U.S. Treasury banks? Why is the Federal Reserve bank system owned by a British foreign corporation and controlled by the 13 most wealthy families of our world?
The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
So, that's pretty interesting, right? I particularly like the part where Richard Nixon said in 1971 to take the US dollar off the gold standard temporarily. Temporarily has a time frame, you know. This is 1971, we're today in 2025. So, how is that for temporary, okay? Anyway, moving on. So, how did all this happen? Well, the US was bankrupt again. When the USA was sold to the bankers, a salvage lien was placed on every asset, including the people of the new federalized states. Moving to 1933, the economic crash, and they were broke again, an income tax was placed on the people to pay these foreign bankers who own the IMF, International Monetary Fund, which owns the IRS. The population were collateralized to pay off the losses incurred by the previous government. Thanks to the bar legal system and admiralty law, each person, as its birth, has entered into a commercial contract with the banksters, Khazarian Mafia, unwillingly. Social security numbers, etc., exist for this purpose only. It is the number of the collateral. On paper, you are property. You are, indeed, a corporation. The flesh and blood living being is just a vessel. If you will, look at your passport, your driving license, your tax papers, fines, etc. In all commercial transactions between you and the entities, your name is always in capital letters. This is not your name. This is the name of your straw man, the fictional name that was created on your behalf at your birth in order to capitalize on your works and efforts in life, as this short video will describe.
Ah, the government. It loves you and wants to keep you safe and well. It even wants to make paying taxes, fines, and court costs easier for you. How? Well, you'll need to meet your straw man. He was born the same day you were. He looks like you, has the same name, and lives in your house, but you never knew he existed. You will have even paid his parking tickets or taxes. The worst part? He's been dead from day one. From every birth certificate, a legal personality, or legal fiction, is created with the same name to confuse little old you into thinking it's you. So, there is a human you and a paper you, or as it's commonly known, a straw man. So when it seems like government officials, court clerks, or the police are speaking English, they aren't. They're speaking legalese, designed to make you agree to verbal and written contracts without even knowing about it, all spun from Black's Law Dictionary. For example, when the police say, "Do you understand?" you'll say, "Yes." What they are really saying is, "Do you stand under our authority?" Oops-a-daisy, you just created a verbal contract with them. Oh, you clever government. Did you know that whenever you register something, you are handing over title to the person you register it with? That's right. Whenever you register something with the government, they assume it belongs to them. Registered your car? Super! Now you are the registered keeper of your vehicle, and the government can crush it when you don't pay your, straw man's taxes. Expecting a new bundle of joy? Well, then you need to register your little darling with a birth certificate. Then they can start the process all over again and create a new straw man for your little one. Isn't that great? So when Junior grows up, he'll be able to generate revenue just like you have. When you notify on your baby by signing the birth certificate, your child becomes a ward of state, and if the government doesn't like what you're doing, they'll assume it's okay to take the child away, or make new rules for things they don't like. Not enough school? Smacking your child? Shouting too loudly? Then it's off to social services for the little one. When you get a bill, it's sent to you, but belongs to your straw man, not you. That's why bills, fines, and summons start with Mr., Mrs., or Ms. Sometimes you'll see your surname in capitals, just like on a gravestone. That's because your straw man is dead, and just a silly piece of paper, created before you could comprehend or even consent to it. When you go to court, you represent your straw man, so you, the human, take on any costs, fees, taxes, and fines involved for the straw man. The human you doesn't even need to pay them. But you made a contract with the court by appearing on behalf of your legal personality or straw man, just like the government knew you would. Confused? Well, don't worry. The government doesn't want you to know anyway. If you knew, you'd stop paying things like council tax and parking tickets. Because when you go to court, you are representing your straw man. You are you, alive and made of flesh and blood. Your straw man, or legal personality, is a piece of paper created from your birth certificate. And you think it's you. What a silly Billy. Would you like to know more? Well, then go over to tpuc.org. Get up, get informed, and get real.
That's another nice little clip for you. I made it run all the way through because I do want to give credit to the people that put this stuff out there. So I want you to know who they are, and I give them full credit for this information because it's hard work. I know it is. So moving on. When you enter into court in the bar system, you are not alive. You are presumed dead at sea. And once you cross the bar, the wooden gate in the courtroom, so to speak, you are on the water. You cannot represent yourself because dead people do not speak. You need a lawyer to speak on your behalf. And he represents the law of the water, Admiralty law, as Jordan Maxwell explained before. You're not on land anymore. What is even worse in this entire situation, if it could be, but unfortunately it is the monetization of your straw man. You're not even aware, but millions of dollars or whatever currency you want to use are made on your behalf. Yes, this is how evil they are. David Lester Straits, another superhero of mine, explains it very well in this video clip, which is rather lengthy, but I really need you to hear this to set the foundation of where we stand today. And by the way, David Lester Straits passed away in 2024 on April 1st, Fool's Day. So he's no longer with us. So I honor him with this beautiful clip.
What is the legal definition of the word minor? It's someone under the age of 18, right? We all know that part of it. Or, this part we don't know, someone of any age who hasn't claimed their minor estate. Have you claimed your minor estate? You're a minor. Have you? Have you? Did you even know you had a minor estate? What if I told you you were worth millions of dollars and you didn't even know it? And what if I could prove it to you? And that you have a trust fund, and you're all trust fund babies. And that trust fund is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And so when you signed that mortgage, they borrowed out of your trust fund and paid it off. And then you just keep paying it back. And paying it back. And paying it back. Why is that? 5 years ago, as ambassador of Voice of Youth, I gave a speech at The Hague. And I told our world leaders the story of a mother. And the story of a mother, I was told afterwards from just about everybody that this is the most important story that should be told every man, woman, and child on earth, but that they don't want me to tell it. You never tell me not to do something that's right, because then I'm going to tell it over and over and over again. Okay? A mother, 9 months pregnant, pay close attention to this, guys. I'm telling you, it's important for your life, your children's lives, your grandchildren's lives, for generations to come. But a mother, 9 months pregnant, walks into a foundling hospital. What is the legal definition of the word foundling? It's a safe place to abandon a child. Did you know all churches, all hospitals, all police stations, and all fire stations in the United States are designated as foundling by Congress? You can take a baby and put it in a basket and walk into any of those 4 locations and set that basket down on the floor and smile and wave and walk out without any consequences to yourself whatsoever. Can you even imagine that? That you can abandon a child? But they designated those places as foundling hospitals. Did they tell you? On a brass plaque somewhere in an obscure location inside the hospital, probably under a stairwell, it says this hospital is a foundling hospital. Foundling Hospital. So a mother, 9 months pregnant, walks into a foundling hospital. She goes through a major medical procedure called childbirth, where she's in pain and under duress. She's probably under the influence of painkillers of some type. She has that beautiful baby, and all she's thinking about is getting home with it and leaving. But see, the baby in history, throughout history, came out of the water, was tugged through the birth canal, was docked at the dock by the dock tender, where a bill of lading was filled out and received on the cargo, where its soul was taken, its soul plates, the footprints of the baby, okay? They took the baby's soul, then they sent it out with a tug, and is presumed dead and lost at sea until it should return and claim its minor estate. No physician delivers a baby. Only a doctor does. Doctor is dock tender. The baby is a vessel, a ship. That's where the all caps name comes in. If you look at the names of ships, they're in all capital letters. Okay? No one disclosed the terms and conditions of the contract, yet you were handed a stack of papers to fill out, and you were only told, and this was right out of the nurse's manual, this is just to register your baby with the state and to give it a name. And you fill out the paperwork, and you name your baby, and you sign as an informant. What is the legal definition of the word informant? Someone who gives someone else up to another, thereby giving the title and equity of your child to the state. This creates a doctrine called parens patriae. It's Latin for state is your parent. State is the parent. Creates a doctrine of parens patriae. Through this doctrine, that's how they have control over you. And through your consent of being a citizen, a person, a resident. 3 things you never want to be. The doctrine of parens patriae. So, no terms and conditions of the sales contract were given. No full and honest disclosure of the contract. No 2 wedding signatures. No one there was securities licensed, insurance licensed. No prospectus was given. If you go to your stockbroker and you want to invest in a corporation, he is required by law to give you a prospectus, right? And you weren't given one. What I'm trying to teach you here is it was all done through fraud without any full and honest disclosure of the contract. You were licensed, bonded, insured. Your vessel was created. A Susta QV trust was created. A Susta QV trust is an individual trust underneath the umbrella of the public charitable trust. So the Public Charitable Trust Act of 1882 created the Public Charitable Trust. The Susta QV Trust Act created the Susta QV Trust, each individual trust that you all have through your birth certificate and registration. On your birth certificate, there's a bank name. It's on bond paper. There's a CUSIP number, CUSIP number. What is a CUSIP number? It's an investment control number that's regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. If you were born between 1933 and 1975, you were bonded for $630,000 and insured for $1 million. If you were born after 1975, you were bonded for $1 million and insured for $2 million. That's just the initial investment. It's the initial upfront investment. You were a few days old, right? So like me, I was born on April 20th, on 4/20. Nice. I knew there would be one in the crowd. And my vessel was created on 5/3. 2 different dates, 2 different events. My vessel was born on May the 3rd. I was born on April 20th. For that period of time, I was a state national. In fact, I was a Californian. I was born in California, and I was a state national. I was a free, independent, one of we the people for that long. And then I got registered, and I became a citizen, a person, and a resident. And I lost all my diplomatic immunity. I lost it all. I became a servant, a slave. See, the 13th Amendment of the Constitution freed the black slaves, and the 14th Amendment of the Constitution made all of us slaves. See, there's a maximum law that says that in which one creates, one controls. God created me, and he controlled me. And then unknowingly, while under duress, without any full and honest disclosure of the terms and conditions of the contract, with no one even licensed to explain it available, my mother warded me to the state in a birth ward. I became a ward of the state. Why do you think a birthing ward is called a ward? I became a ward of the state, a ward of the court, under the doctrine of parens patriae. I became a slave, and I didn't even know it. I grew up thinking I was free. I fought for this country. I thought I was free. I got shot. I thought I was doing it for the right reasons, so I was free. All right. What happens? What happens at our birth with the SESTA QV? First of all, we have a PCT, Public Charitable Trust, an umbrella. There's 337 million little CQVs, SESTA QV trusts, one for each of us, right? In this country.
Say that one more time. CQV?
Yeah, every individual in the United States and in most countries of the world have a SESTA QV trust. And we have this CQV. And here's what happens, and this is incredibly important. Y'all know basic accounting? What is that? It's a balance sheet, right? A balance sheet. It's got debits and credits. You guys have been thinking you're the debtor. They keep telling us that, right? We're in debt. We're a debtor. We owe money on credit cards. We owe money on our houses. We owe money on everything. What happens at birth, though, and I'm just going to use the figures from 75 to now because it's round numbers. We were bonded for $1 million. What does that mean? That means the bank went to the International Monetary Fund, and the bank, on behalf of the public under your CUSIP number, borrowed from the International Monetary Fund $1 million in ones, fives, tens, 20s, 50s, hundreds, and they threw it out there into the general public. They distributed that $1 million to the bank for every person who's born. That's what they do. On the credit side, $1 million worth of United States Treasury bonds are issued, and they're sold. They're hypothecated. They are bundled, and they are sold on the stock exchange. And if we wanted to, I could pull up a website if we had internet access, and I could put in one of your CUSIP numbers, and I could show you the companies that are buying and selling you today. You have more than one CUSIP number, by the way. As we increase in value, I'll just put it that way, as we get better in our life, the more we join the military or get more college degrees, we get more and more CUSIP numbers. You are the credit. You are the creditor. They're making you believe you're also the debtor, and you are. You're both. This is your vessel. This is you. Okay? This is your labor. This is your worth. Every time I got an advanced degree in college, I got a new CUSIP number. So in the military, I got a new CUSIP number. All these CUSIP numbers are attached to my main birth number. Okay? Is this in a bad spot? Anyway, let's stop here. It's a balance sheet, right? It's balanced. It's got $1 million on one side, $1 million on the other. This gets invested. It keeps growing and growing and growing. And let's just say it grows to $100 million. And by the way, that figure's low. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. Really? I've seen individuals worth 35 billion or more that didn't know they had a dime. Okay, it keeps growing and growing and growing. Our first 18 years of life, we're not spending anything. So nothing is going over here, our first 18 years. That's growing and growing and growing for 18 years, and it's being hypothecated and traded. And they've done a good job of managing it. They really have. First 18 years, it's growing and growing and growing. You're not spending anything. You're not adding anything to the debit side. Then you go get a job, and you get married, and you go out and you buy a house. I'm just going to use numbers. And the numbers themselves don't matter. It's the concept, okay? You buy a car or two. You buy some utilities or two over your lifetime, some medical bills, some food, whatever. They keep track of it all through your tax returns, your credit card, your bank statements. Banking is all tied into the IMF, the Federal Reserve. We got a big buildings of bean counters called the Department of Fiscal Services, and those accountants just keep track of everything, everybody's life. And this all starts to add up on the debit side. And this just keeps growing and growing and growing on the investment side. At some point in time, you die, and it goes through probate. They take some of this, and let's just say over your lifetime you've spent, I'm going to round it off to $10 million. So they subtract $10 million out of your investment, and they pay off all this, and it becomes a zero balance. They even pay back the initial loan to the International Monetary Fund, plus interest. That was a loan from a foreign entity, by the way, to the Public Charitable Trust. And they pay it back. The balance is zero. Now this has, let's just say for this discussion, has $90 million left in it. What happens to it? The Sesta QV Trust lives on in perpetuity forever.
So it keeps going.
Everyone who has ever died since 1933 is currently funding government. This money gets reinvested. They can't take this, but the balance must stay the same forever. But if it keeps earning, they just sweep it off the top, and it funds government. It's called off-book funds. In the states, it's GSA, and in the federal government, it's CQV. And it continues to fund government. Why do you think they don't care if they spend $3 trillion on foreign entities?
Because it's not their money.
It came out of your trusts. It's not part of taxes. In fact, if you took the entire federal budget, how much is derived from taxes and tariffs? If you call up the Department of Fiscal Services and you send a FOIA request, and you ask them, who is the largest contributor to the federal budget? The Department of Justice, to the tune of $1 trillion a day, is taken out of our Sesta QV trusts or our court systems every day. $1 trillion. That's more in 25 days than our entire gross domestic product in a year. In 25 days. They don't have to disclose the CQV. See, I had to prove this in federal court. to get to talk about it. So, a big portion of this comes out of this before we die.
Change my ways, those evil ways.
So, that's pretty remarkable. I know it's a long-winded discussion, but I think David Strait lays it out really well. And anybody with the patience to look into this, the CEST QV Trust, you will find it. It does exist. And that's why I put up this little bond on the page right here. You can see the QSIP number on the center right of the picture. That is connected to a birth certificate. And this single paper alone seems to be worth, what, 100 million or whatever. This is what they call common stock. And this number is being traded on the stock market on a daily basis in your name. So yeah, I imagine that some people would have many questions at this point. Some might be bewildered and angry. I don't ask you to take me for my word. Quite the opposite. Please don't believe anything I say. Go online and research the CEST QV Trust and check it for yourself. There's plenty of information available from credible sources online already. One intelligent question I have received from an intelligent friend was as follows. If the language of law is so important, and admiralty law is based on this language, why is it English? Well, think about it more deeply. English is 50% based on Latin. So is the law. We see Latin all over the law books, and this is what makes it so hard to comprehend. I did study Latin in school, and I absolutely hated it. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. If admiralty law was created mainly for trade, and most trade was at the time performed by British and Spanish, both Latin languages, I might add, it would make perfect sense to base it on that spoken language as it works both in English and Spanish, two of the biggest spoken languages in the world at the time of commercial trading. I do, however, have some good news. It's not all doom and gloom, you know. The word of this is coming out. Many people are looking into this conspiracy, and indeed a conspiracy it is, and there's no theories here. And they're making it public on various forums. Some citizens have managed to access their own trusts as well. There are some testimonials I have seen, so it is apparently possible to do legally. It's an uphill battle, but one I would surely be willing to try if I could. Also, I do not know how the system is set up in different countries, but it's a worldwide phenomenon and should be investigated on a national basis in my view. Another thing that tickles me and gives me hope is that I found this particular document last year. Again, could very well be a fabrication, but I post it here for you to see it anyway. Now, this could be part of the World War IV scenario that I will describe in detail in another chapter later. But we're not there yet. Read it, and you will start to understand where we're going with this narrative. What you're looking at here on the screen is a United States bankruptcy court from Florida Tallahassee Division. against the United States Corporation Company. And this is an involuntary bankruptcy, Chapter 11. This is very, very interesting stuff. I mean, what has the corporation gone bankrupt? Does this in some way maybe relate to the previous chapter we spoke about with the $300 trillion? Just maybe, I don't know, but I have to put it out there. This document here is signed by Donald J. Trump. And the yellowed part that you can see on your screen says that the bankrupt United States own its true creditors, which is the American people, in direct relation to the borrowed gold, and National Banking Emergency Act of 1933. Where did we hear that before? All commercial public debt obligations while transacting all businesses within United States commercial markets belong to the United States, as the United States is the true obliger in each and every U.S. commercial transaction. So, what are we going to make of this? Right? I know it sounds doom and gloom, and all of these laws and admiralty law and this and that and up and down. But this document was signed on May 4th, 2020, when Trump was still in power. And, you know, with everything we've seen so far, doesn't it appear that somehow we're getting out of this eternal debt trap that we can never explain or see? But, you know, love or hate him, Donald Trump, but he is definitely doing something working for the people here. Because these documents are real. What we saw before, the HSBC files, appear to be real. Right? So, if the Khazarian Mafia has been in charge for so long, and they have manipulated and subverted us and destroyed the law as we know it, the common law, that is, the law of man and the law of the land, isn't this a signal that something is actually shifting? And doesn't this explain why they are trying to take out this man, Donald J. Trump, so badly? And why the media is going after him so badly? Because it makes perfect sense to me. If all of this is true, then maybe Donald Trump knows way, way more than he lets on. And we'll end it there for this chapter. I know it's a long one, but it's necessary for you to hear. So we're going to jump into the next one, chapter 3.2, which talks about karma, collective programming, and fake news, which will give you another nice little platform to stand on. We have 2 legs, we have 2 feet. I am now giving you the first leg and the first foot. In the next video, I'll give you the second leg and the second foot to stand on before we move on. So that's all for me today. Max out, and peace. Bless you all.